picture this scenario. You're spending your days in the high-stakes world of investment banking, right?
Right. Wow. Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah. So you're analyzing these multi-million-dollar corporate deals, building complex financial models, and you are literally surrounded by the brightest financial minds in the industry.
Right, the absolute peak of the finance world.
Exactly. But by night, your personal bank account is just running on fumes. You have zero savings, and you are, I mean, literally one missed paycheck away from a complete financial disaster.
It sounds like a total contradiction, I know. But it is actually one of the most common, unspoken realities in the financial sector.
Is it really that common?
No, absolutely. Because proximity to money does not automatically grant you the behavioral discipline to actually manage it.
Wow. Yeah. And that striking paradox is exactly where we're starting today. Our source material is a deep dive into the philosophy of Nisha. She's a qualified accountant and a former investment banker who lived that exact contradiction.
Yeah, she was right in the middle of it.
Right. And today's deep dive is all about her blueprint for what she calls the easiest and laziest way to get rich.
Which is quite a title.
It is. And the mission here is really to dismantle the idea that building wealth requires, like, a lottery win or massive
Right.
inherited capital or, spending your life glued to 6 different monitors tracking algorithmic microtrends.
Yeah, and I suspect anyone listening to this might be instinctively raising their guard when they hear phrases like, easiest way to get rich.
Oh, for sure. Oh, it sounds like clickbait.
Exactly. We are so conditioned by this relentless internet culture of, crypto bros and overnight success scams that simplicity just feels like a trap.
It really does.
But the strategy we're examining today relies on a foundation that is entirely devoid of hype. I mean, it is grounded in pure, unadulterated, long-term mathematics.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we get to the mechanics of the math, we really have to look at the psychological trap that catches so many of us, including, professionals like Nisha. Because she didn't start from some pedestal of financial enlightenment. She started with a confession about lifestyle creep and this illusion of the permanent paycheck.
Yeah, lifestyle creep is such a fascinating behavioral mechanism. I mean, Nisha was earning a very comfortable salary, but she fell into what is essentially revenge spending.
Revenge spending, like getting back at the job.
Sorta, yeah. Dropping hundreds on these mediocre desk lunches that she didn't even enjoy. Buying expensive clothes she wore, like, twice. Right? When you work an exhausting, high-stress job, your brain rationalizes those purchases, not as luxuries, but as deserved compensations for your lost time and high stress.
You essentially treat your paycheck as a law of physics. You assume that because the money came in on the 1st of this month, it will just inevitably arrive on the 1st of next month, forever.
Exactly.
You anchor your entire lifestyle to a best-case scenario.
Which works flawlessly until the environment shifts. And for Nisha, the environmental shift happened on just a random Tuesday. She was sitting at her desk, and the colleague sitting right next to her.
Like right next to it?
Literally the next desk over.
Yeah.
Doing the exact same job with the exact same apparent job security, and he was laid off without a single warning.
Wow.
Just packed up a box and was gone.
See, that is the moment the illusion shatters. When you realize that relying on a single source of income isn't just risky, it's a massive structural vulnerability in your life.
It really is a wake-up call.
And it leads to the very first step of her strategy, which, spoiler alert, isn't opening a brokerage account or analyzing stock charts.
That's why not.
It's building an emergency fund, starting with 1 month of living expenses, then scaling that to 3 and eventually 6 months.
Yeah, it's the unglamorous part.
It is. And mechanically, I look at this cash cushion not just as a rainy day fund, but as like a shock absorber or a liquidity moat around your financial castle.
Oh, a liquidity mode is a perfect way to conceptualize it.
Yeah, please do.
So if you don't have liquid cash available and you hit a severe life event like a medical emergency or a sudden layoff, you still have mandatory liabilities.
Rent is still due.
Exactly. Rent is due, food still costs money. So if all your capital is tied up in equities, you are forced to raid your own investments just to survive.
Right.
And if you happen to lose your job during a broader economic downturn, which is statistically the most likely time you will lose your job, you're forced to sell your investments at the absolute bottom of the market.
So you're locking in catastrophic losses simply because you needed cash for groceries.
Precisely. Now, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the emergency fund fundamentally alters your psychological risk profile.
Okay, how so?
Well, yes, it physically prevents the forced liquidation we just described, but more importantly, it makes long-term investing emotionally tolerable.
Right, because markets are inherently volatile. They're going to fluctuate wildly.
Right, and if your rent money is exposed to that volatility, your amygdala is going to hijack your decision-making. You will panic sell.
You basically have to.
But if you have 6 months of expenses safely walled off in a high-yield savings account, a 20% market correction becomes irrelevant to your daily survival.
Ah, I see.
The emergency fund is the behavioral armor that allows you to execute a multi-decade mathematical strategy without your own panic getting in the way.
It detaches your emotions from the daily news cycle. You're basically buying the privilege of not caring.
Exactly.
So, assuming we've dug the moat and filled it with 6 months of cash, we finally get to the actual engine of wealth creation. And this is the lazy part we promised at the start.
It is remarkably passive. Each strategy revolves around taking a set amount, and let's just use £100 a month as our baseline for this.
Okay, 100 pounds.
Right. And you funnel it into a broad, low-cost index fund. And then, crucially, you do nothing else.
Which is great, because we all know the basic premise of an index fund. You aren't trying to find the needle in the haystack. You're just buying the whole haystack.
Right. It's a self-cleansing mechanism.
Yeah, bad companies fall out of the index. Innovative companies rise to the top. So you're essentially placing a macroeconomic bet on the continued productivity of human civilization.
That's a great way to put it.
But the friction here isn't the concept of the index fund. The friction is the timeline, isn't it?
The timeline is absolutely where the human brain short circuits. We are evolutionarily wired to expect immediate, linear feedback from our efforts.
Right, like if I spend an hour picking berries,
Yeah.
I want an hour's worth of berries in my basket.
Exactly. But compounding growth does not behave linearly. Nietzsche refers to the beginning of this journey as the heavy lifting phase, and it is a brutal test of endurance.
Okay, let's run the math on that heavy lifting phase. Assuming a historical average return of, say, 10% annually, compounding monthly. If I put in 100 pounds a month for 2 full years, I have physically traded my labor for 2,400 pounds of principal.
And after those 2 years of rigid discipline, your portfolio is worth roughly 2,666 pounds.
So my reward for 24 months of delayed gratification is 266 pounds of growth.
Yeah.
That is incredibly anticlimactic. I mean, I'm doing 90% of the work, and the money is barely working at all.
Right, and that dopamine deficit in the first few years is why the vast majority of retail investors abandon ship.
They just give up.
They look at that 266 pounds and conclude that the strategy is flawed, or that it's just too slow, so they pivot to something riskier, hoping for a shortcut.
Which usually ends badly.
Very. Furthermore, during this heavy lifting phase, you might encounter a market dip where your portfolio value drops below the 2,400 pounds you actually contributed.
Which feels like a cosmic punishment for being financially responsible.
It really does.
Yeah.
But it's just normal market breathing. Selling at that point is the fatal error because you abort the mission right before the math actually takes over.
Okay, well, let's look at what happens when the math actually takes over. If we stretch that exact same 100 pounds a month out to 10 years.
Okay, 10 years.
You've now contributed 12,000 pounds of your own money. But at that 10% average return, the account sits at roughly 20,600 pounds.
Nice.
Over 8,600 pounds of it. That is pure, unearned capital appreciation.
So the ratio of effort to reward is finally beginning to invert.
Yes. And if you extrapolate that to a 40-year horizon, still never increasing the contribution from that original 100 pounds, you contribute a total of 48,000 pounds over your working life.
Okay.
But the portfolio grows to over 637,000 pounds. The money has become a vastly more efficient worker than you are.
That is the sheer kinetic energy of compound interest. I mean, it's exponential growth masked behind decades of just mundane consistency.
I love that. But I do need to push back on this for a second, because a 40-year horizon introduces a massive macroeconomic variable inflation.
Yes.
I mean, 637,000 pounds looks fantastic on a spreadsheet today, but 4 decades from now, the purchasing power of that money is going to be severely degraded. A loaf of bread isn't going to cost what it costs today.
Right.
Does this flat contribution model actually hold up in the real world?
It's a critical challenge for sure. If you lock your contribution rate at £100 for 40 years, inflation will absolutely erode the real-world value of your final number.
So what's the fix?
Well, Nisha's blueprint doesn't suggest a static contribution. It requires a dynamic stepping stone strategy. You have to scale your investments to match your career trajectory and your nominal wage growth.
Okay, so the £100 is really just the starting block. You're actively leveraging your increasing human capital.
Precisely how it functions. Let's map out a realistic human career arc. In your 20s, your disposable income is low, so you commit to the £100 a month. But as you transition into your 30s, you acquire specialized skills, you earn promotions, and your income rises to outpace inflation.
Hopefully, yeah.
Right, so then you increase your monthly investment to £300.
And mathematically, how does that shift the trajectory?
If we maintain our 10% assumption, by the time you reach your 40s, the portfolio is sitting at over £117,000.
Wow.
And notice the internal composition of that wealth. You contributed roughly £56,000, but over £61,000 is pure investment growth.
Across the line.
Exactly. You've officially crossed the threshold where your capital is generating more wealth than your labor.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting. Because in your 40s, you're typically entering your peak earning years.
Right.
So you scale the contribution up to £600 a month. You let that run for a decade. Then, in the final sprint to retirement during your 50s, you push it to £800 a month.
A very realistic progression.
And when we run the final tally on this stepped approach over 40 years, the numbers become just staggering.
They really do. The final portfolio value hits over £1.3 million.
Over £1.3 million.
Yeah.
And to achieve that seven-figure outcome, your total out-of-pocket contribution across all 4 decades was just over £224,000.
Incredible.
The entire remaining balance, well over £1 million, is generated strictly by the mechanics of compounding. You are not building wealth by outsmarting the market. You're building wealth by outweighting it.
Exactly. And it is vital to dispel the myth that this only works if you start at age 22.
Oh, that's a great point.
The source material actually highlights a student from Nisha's investing cohort who was 45 years old when they finally confronted their financial reality.
45, okay.
They had that moment of existential dread, realizing they had zero retirement assets and a shrinking time horizon.
I can imagine. The temptation at 45 is to think, well, it's too late. The compounding window has closed. I might as well not even try.
But they didn't succumb to that. They deployed this exact scaling strategy, aggressively adjusting their contributions to their mid-career salary.
And how did it play out?
Well, today, that individual's portfolio is throwing off £1,400 a month strictly in dividend payments.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Mechanically, that is the ultimate goal, right? When the dividends alone provide a living wage, you are completely decoupled from the necessity of selling your labor.
Exactly.
But this brings up a glaring question. If the architecture of this strategy is this historically verified, and the barrier to entry is just £100, why isn't this the default state of every working adult?
That's the big question. Because the math is rational, but human beings are deeply emotional.
We really are.
We are our own final boss in this game. The source material isolates 2 massive psychological roadblocks that consistently derail this process, regardless of how well someone understands the numbers.
Okay, let's go through them. The first roadblock is the obsession with timing the market.
Right.
And looking at the macroeconomic environment today, I completely understand the instinct to wait. You open a news app, and you are just hit with a barrage of terrifying metrics.
It's overwhelming.
Core inflation is sticky, central banks are threatening further rate hikes, geopolitical tensions are escalating, and the yield curve is screaming recession.
Yeah.
It feels reckless to allocate capital into equities when the geopolitical sky appears to be falling. The logical human response is, I'll just hold my cash and wait for the dust to settle.
What's fascinating here is how the efficient market hypothesis exposes waiting for safety as one of the most destructive financial behaviors possible.
How so?
We have to understand how markets actually price information. The stock market is essentially a forward-looking discounting mechanism. By the time a risk is being debated on the evening news, the institutional algorithms and hedge funds have already priced that risk into the valuation of the equities.
So the current price already reflects the panic.
Yeah. It does. Let's look at the historical precedents. During the 2008 financial crisis, or the panicked sell-offs at the onset of COVID-19, retail investors pulled their money out.
Right.
They were convinced that the global economy was entering a multi-year depression. They wanted to wait until the economic indicators turned positive before they bought back in.
But waiting for the positive economic indicators means you miss the actual market recovery.
Mathematically, yes. By the time the central banks announce that the recession is officially over and the unemployment numbers stabilize and your neighbors are talking about how great the economy feels.
The market's already up.
Exactly. The stock market has already been rallying for 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
The institutional money bought the bottom while the retail investors were waiting for permission from the news cycle. By waiting until it feels safe, you are guaranteeing that you will buy back in at a massive premium.
It is a phenomenal illusion. The feeling of safety is actually just the cost of missing the growth. Consistency is the only hedge against our own inability to predict the future.
Spot on. Time in the market reliably neutralizes the volatility of timing the market.
But even if someone internalizes that, and they resolve to invest regardless of the headlines, they slam into the second roadblock. And in the algorithmic age we live in, I think this one is even more pervasive.
Information overload.
Information overload. The financial media ecosystem is structurally designed to overwhelm you.
Completely.
You decide you want to take control of your finances. You go to YouTube or TikTok, and the algorithm realizes you're interested in money. Instantly, you are fire-hosed with contradictory, high-anxiety content.
Oh, it's the knife.
One creator is mapping out these intricate Elliott wave theories on tech stocks. The next video is someone screaming that fiat currency is collapsing and you need to move all your liquidity into some fringe cryptocurrency.
Right.
Then a third person is telling you to leverage your home equity to buy commercial real estate syndications. It is a cacophony of urgency.
And we have to recognize the incentives at play here. Content platforms monetize engagement. And nothing drives engagement more efficiently than fear, complexity, and the promise of a hidden secret.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
The financial industry and the content ecosystem benefit from making wealth creation seem incomprehensibly complex because that perceived complexity forces you to rely on their expensive expertise, or their trading courses, or their daily market updates.
Nisha uses a brilliant analogy for this in her analysis. She compares trying to learn investing through algorithmic social media feeds to trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle using pieces taken from 10 completely different boxes.
It captures the futility perfectly.
Right.
Every single piece of advice might technically be a valid tactic for someone's specific strategy, but when you try to snap them all together, they just don't form a coherent picture.
They just create friction.
Yes. And when human beings face high-stakes, high-friction decisions, our default biological response is paralysis.
We just do nothing.
Exactly. We leave the cash in a checking account, allowing inflation to silently confiscate our purchasing power year after year.
The ultimate irony is that the antidote to all of this algorithmic noise is profound, almost radical simplicity. You don't need to dissect quarterly earnings reports. You don't need to understand the nuances of options trading or delta hedging.
You need a diversified index fund, an automated monthly transfer, and the discipline to let it run.
That's it.
The true difficulty of investing isn't the intellectual challenge of asset allocation, it's the behavioral endurance required to ignore the noise and not tinker with a machine that is already working.
So what does this all mean? If we distill this entire philosophy down for you listening right now, it represents a fundamental shift in how we conceptualize financial success. Getting rich is not a sudden event. It's not a speculative bet that pays off overnight. It's a slow, methodical process of transferring your wealth from your active labor to passive capital.
Beautifully said.
It's acknowledging that while you may not be a Wall Street insider, you have access to the exact same compounding mathematics that they do. You just need to start with whatever margin you have today, automate the behavior, and allow the decades to do their work.
And this raises an important question about agency. The source material features a quote from a student that perfectly encapsulates the end goal of this strategy.
Oh, let's hear it.
They describe the feeling of finally moving from being a passive passenger in their financial life, just, crossing their fingers that the paychecks keep clearing and hoping retirement magically funds itself, to firmly putting themselves in the driver's seat.
When you automate the strategy, you aren't just hoping you avoid the potholes anymore. You own the vehicle, you know exactly how the engine works, and the destination is mathematically guaranteed as long as you don't pull over.
And that sense of control is arguably more valuable than the money itself. It eliminates the ambient financial anxiety that plagues so many people.
And that leads to a concluding thought I want to leave you with today. We've just dissected a wealth-building architecture that is mathematically sound, entirely accessible to a median income earner, and reliant solely on time and discipline, rather than extraordinary intellect or sheer luck.
It's a universally applicable framework.
So, if the mechanism for financial security is genuinely this transparent, why is it treated like a proprietary secret?
Right.
How dramatically would our socioeconomic landscape transform if this exact blueprint, the heavy lifting phase, the scaling strategy, the psychology of compounding, was mandatory curriculum for every 18-year-old?
That would be world-changing.
Imagine an entire generation entering the workforce, not with financial anxiety, but with an automated mathematical roadmap already in motion. We treat wealth like a mystery, but as we've seen today, the X-ray is perfectly clear. The cure is just time. Something to mull over as you review your own automated transfers this month. Until next time, keep digging deeper.